welcome to A Brave Space for Courageous Peace, a interfaith youth webinar. And we're really excited to have you here today with the Lutheran World Federation, the Alamana Center, and you'll hear a little bit more about both those organizations later. I see some of you are already in the chat telling us your name, where you're from, what organization you're with, what you do, and we would love for more of you to introduce yourselves in the chat so that each other can see, so our panelists can see who all is here. I'm really excited because we have some amazing youth panelists here today who are willing to share their stories, their perspectives, their joys and challenges in this work in peace building and living interfaith relationships and conversations together. We are here because we know that interfaith dialogue is often perceived as a theoretical practice for specialists or a formal activity that's disconnected from everyday life. But really, our objective here is to facilitate a conversation between youth from different faith traditions to share what they've learned about promoting constructive interfaith relations, because we believe that young people are and can be leaders in this work. So we also seek to draw out insights that can encourage more young people to contribute meaningfully in and beyond their own faith communities. So as you listen to this conversation, whether you are a youth yourself or whether you are a leader of another generation, I would just encourage you to think about where in your life and organization you see youth leading this work. And if you don't see any youth around you leading this work, then I would really encourage you to look for some, because the young people are here and excited about building these relationships and having these conversations. So I look forward to the conversation that we're going to have today. And I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Sullivan from the Lutheran World Federation, to give us some opening remarks and context.
Thank you, Savannah, for your introduction. It's really, we're really excited to see all of you join us today. And this week is World Interfaith Harmony Week, which is officially observed by the United Nations. And it happens every year during the first week of February. And the main slogan for the World Interfaith Harmony Week is love of God and love of neighbor, which is quite familiar to many of us here. But I'd like to add, they extended it further to be more inclusive of others. And they said it is also the love of the good and the love of neighbor. So it's a lesser known United Nations event compared to others, but it's still significant. It's still really important. And I'm glad that we can have this webinar to bring the contribution to nurture constructive friendships and with people of different faiths during these critical times. So all of you have been introducing yourself. So I am Reverend Dr. Sullivan, the Program Executive for Public Theology and Interreligious Relations with the Lutheran World Federation. So we are in 99 countries, we have 148 member churches, and we live in various contexts where increasingly, even in the places like Europe and North America, where it's becoming more pluralistic, and even Latin America, these issues are even more pressing today. But also those of us who come from Asia, like me, Malaysia, and others in Africa region and Pacifics, this is also very much part of our global reality and our everyday reality. Now, when we think of interfaith relations, often, as Savannah said, we may think it's more for the senior or the scholarly, and usually the picture is we sit on a panel, we talk about matters of doctrine and transcendence, and the temptation is to only see that as a picture of dialogue, and we miss the real life encounters of people of different faiths, of people at different ages. So I'm convinced that we can bring lived experience close to dialogue, and I'm even more inspired to be able to hear from young people who bring energy and creativity in what we can do together so to build better relationships with our friends from different religious backgrounds. I like the word safe space, and I hope this is a safe space for us, because we live in a world that is hard for people to open up. We are maybe afraid of each other, or afraid that others will judge us or judge our beliefs, values, and practices. but we need to start there. We need a safe space. But I love our title because it's a brave space. It's a space where we can also talk about struggles, difficulties, and we have a listening posture with a commitment to one another and to really walk alongside each other, especially during this time of pandemic and the impact of the pandemic that has on all of us. So, I know for some people, when I was younger and when I was engaged in this field of work, sometimes people see interfaith or dialogue as something very tame and not adventurous. But actually, it requires a lot of courage. And that's why I like the other phrase in our title, courageous peace. And it requires courage to counter hateful speech. It requires courage to step up when there's conflict. It requires a lot of courage to keep on promoting peace and pressing on, especially when we might be caught in the middle of a crossfire. So I'm really excited to hear from our panelists, and Savannah will be very able to facilitate this conversation. Aro and myself both represent the Lutheran World Federation and Al Amanah. We want to just step back and listen. So we will be listening, and he will come later to share what are the insights that he has drawn from our panelists today. So I'm looking forward for this time. And like Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And I'm sure all our friends from different faiths would also have in your scriptures and your teachings words and also reflections that resonate with these words too. So over to you, Savannah, so that we can continue with our session. Thank you very much and welcome everybody.
Thank you so much, Reverend Kit. It is good to be together. I'm going to go ahead and ask that our panelists also turn on their videos. And what we're going to do first is just do a brief round of introductions so you can get to know who all is in this virtual room together. I'll begin and then I'll kind of send it around the room so that we can get to know each other a little bit. So my name is Savannah Sullivan. I serve as the program executive for youth at the Lutheran World Federation, and I am myself a young Lutheran, excited to be facilitating this conversation, which is, as Reverend Kit said, a partnership between the Lutheran World Federation and Al Amanah Center, and part of a series of events and conversations that the Lutheran World Federation Global Young Reformers Network is having a part of this year for the Year of Peace. So we know that interfaith conversation is can be a big part of peace building, and we're here to talk about that a little bit today. I would love to invite first Saruni to introduce yourself, say your name and where you are, and a little bit about what brings you to this conversation today.
So, hi everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very honored to be here. I am Saruni. I'm from Indonesia. And I'm just really excited to, I'm here as the event says, as a representative of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Indonesia. And I'm just really excited to know about all the interfaith dialogues that have been going on worldwide, I guess, not just in Indonesia.
Great. Thank you so much, Saruni. Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the privilege to be here. Really such an important conversation and week. And yeah, I'm Rebecca. You can call me Becky. I was born in Singapore and my parents are from India and Sri Lanka. So I have ties to both countries. And I've been working with youth for the past 12 years. And I currently work in the Lutheran Church of Singapore as well, just assisting a lot of different departments in the church. And yeah, happy to be here today. Thanks, Savannah.
Thanks, Rebecca. Jamie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm calling from very early in the morning here in California, in the United States. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. I don't know if I would say I'm a representative of anything here, but I bring myself as a participant, as somebody who used to do a lot of work with Jewish high school students in the Bay Area And now I volunteer for an organization called San Francisco Hillel, which creates community for college students in San Francisco who move here for school. And in my own home, we have a lot of interfaith dialogue. My partner is a Lutheran woman, and this is something that is very relevant to our lives. And so I'm really honored to try and participate in these conversations in a more public and global manner. So thanks so much for inviting me.
Thanks, Jamie. Holly, would you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Holly Dio from Bangladesh. I'm very honored to be here, and I'm really interested to talk about and listen to you all about the interfaith situations and how you are doing your interfaith relationship in your own places. So, I'm really excited on today's dialogue, and thank you all. I'm doing a prison ministry in my own country, and now I am in Oman as a volunteer of Alamana Center, and I'm so happy to be here. And Alamana Center is interfaith based, so I'm glad to join here. Thank you all.
Great. Thanks so much, Holly. And finally, Abdu Jalilu, can you introduce yourself to us?
Okay, thanks for this opportunity. My name is Abdul Jalil. I'm Rukshama from Tanzania, and I'm working on the organization called the TIPF, that is Tanzania Interfaith Partnership, accompanied by Bilal Muslim Mission of Tanzania. And I'm just supervising more than 150 centers of youth. So, and I work with youth for more than, I think it is more than 3 years now. Starting from when I completed my secondary level up to today, I'm working with the youth. So I'm honored, I'm happy to meet you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all for being here. And as we know, part of this conversation is, and part of so many interfaith conversations are just being willing to share about ourselves. They're about knowing our own spiritual traditions and being willing to share with each other about where we come from, and being able to listen to one another and maybe learn something new about spiritual tools and how we engage and see the world. So my first question for all of you is really, we live in an uncertain world. Certainly the last 2 years have been nothing if not uncertain in light of the pandemic, and of course, a number of other ongoing global issues. And so I'm really curious, what spiritual tools have helped you in these past 2 years in times of uncertainty or struggle? What are some of the kind of gifts of your spiritual tradition that you have really been leaning on in these past 2 years? So somebody's got to go first. If you want to, we're going to kind of just have a conversation here, but I know somebody's got to maybe raise up their hand to go first, or I can just pick. Great. Holly, I would love for you to share with us first, and then maybe we'll just let it go.
Thank you. Glad to get this platform. I want to share in last 2 years pandemic situation. So what we, in my experience, in this pandemic situations, everyone are much more try to pray in our Almighty One. So every church, every temple, and every mosque was one prayer, just rescue us from these situations. So it's very touchy and peaceful to peaceful thing that we all are praying for.
Great.
To
Thanks.
overcome these situations. And all in our all faith, people a bit afraid of this COVID, make distance and some things, but so many people, they have big heart and try to help people, try to be more human being. So that was nice. That was most beautiful thing in Bangladesh. And here in Oman, when I heard about Alamana Center and how they're doing interfaith dialogues and more how to build trust, there are so many activities. So I'm really very I'm learning peace and much more peace and much more courage from Alamana Center and their all works.
That's great. Thank you so much. I hear you saying prayer is a really important spiritual tool, and also community and trust building in community. And looking forward to hearing more about how Alamana Center works and how those interfaith dialogues have impacted you during this time. Thanks so much for sharing. Maybe Saruni, can you share with us a little bit about what kind of spiritual tools have helped you get through the past 2 years?
Okay, I think this is a really interesting question. So there have been a lot of changes, obviously, for everyone during the past 2 years. But for me personally, I spent perhaps most of 2020 abroad alone because I was doing my studies. And so it wasn't just a hard time for me to go to the mosque to pray, for instance. But it was a bit hard because I was quite away from my family as well. So mentally, it was also quite draining. But then, like Holly mentioned about community and trust, I found a lot of peace as well from the aunties at my mosque who are who kept checking up on me quite a lot, and that was really nice. And another interesting thing was that I still could actually be connected to people at home via like WhatsApp groups and stuff. So that was quite nice, even though like we did have initial issues with going on from something that was offline to online, to an online platform. Like glitches in Zoom happen every time. But we got there eventually, and the online platforms have actually helped a lot. For instance, getting access to like spiritual articles and also podcasts as well. So that's been very helpful for me personally. Yeah.
Awesome. We'd love to get your podcast recommendation, your spiritual podcast recommendations. I'm sure we have a lot of folks who would benefit from that. Awesome. Jamie, can you tell us a little bit? I hear Saruni, you talking about the spiritual gift of intergenerational relationship with the aunties at your mosque, and also the gifts that the tools that we have, the online tools that we have are, and how they've been able to connect us during this time. So thanks for sharing those. Jamie, what kind of spiritual gifts and reflection have you been relying on in these past 2 years?
Yeah, no, I love this question because a lot of religion takes place outside the home and in community, but a lot of it also does take place just at the home, personally, to kind of pass time and be thankful. And a lot of that kind of was blurring together during COVID. And I would say 2 things. One was just pausing every Friday night and doing Shabbat in our home was really important for me because my partner and I were both working from home. And so you wake up and you shower and you have breakfast and then you turn around and you do work and then you turn around and your work is done and you're at home and you have to make dinner. And there's no break in time in the day. And there's no separation of holy time and regular time or home time and work time. And so just stopping once a week to just say, okay, now we're going to go into the weekend. We light the candles together and we do that was really, it actually became much more significant of a separation of time for me now, I think, than more at other times in my life. And the other thing, totally agree about community and Zoom being a really big part of this. Every community is a little bit different. Every prayer leader is a little bit different. In Judaism, a lot of synagogues kind of pick their own tunes for certain prayers or songs or hymns, or a leader will have a certain speaking style. And one blessing of the last 2 years was that I got to shop around on Zoom to hundreds of different synagogues and services and leaders, and I could find the community or the type of spirituality or the type of public speaker that I wanted on Zoom. If I wanted a certain type of person, I could log on to a service in New York happening 3 hours later at any time I wanted. And it was really special to be able to plug into any community or any type of leader that you wanted to, you know.
I really appreciate those two reflections, both the kind of like unique gift that your spiritual tradition calls you to take a pause. And that is really important in this like endless time of kind of, like you said, being in the house or these days of uncertainty. I think it's really beautiful to hear about how asking to take that, your spirituality asking you to take that intentional time has been helpful. And then, like you said, I mean, to see the diversity within our own faith traditions because of so much being online is really fascinating. I mean, in my own tradition as well, in Christian tradition, Protestant tradition, and in the Lutheran Church generally, there's so much diversity in what we're doing within the Lutheran Church, and so it is a gift to be able to learn and experience that. And I appreciate you bringing that up. We don't all have to answer every question, but this one, I think, when we're talking about our own spiritual tools, it is important for us to really set the context for this conversation and hear from each person. So I'm going to ask Rebecca, can you share with us a little bit just about the spiritual tools that have helped you in this past 2 years?
Yeah, I think I echo everyone's opinions about the personal and the community as well. Everyone had to cope in so many different ways during this time. And for me personally, I think what helped was finding the quiet, to really spend time quieting my soul, because the world was very quiet. No one was going out, and the animals were coming out in the oceans and stuff, but there was a lot of noise in terms of the news, the fear from the news, regulations changing every 2 weeks, and a lot of misinformation as well. So even though everything was quiet, I still found it very noisy. And the way I learned how to ground myself was to look at the sky because we were in lockdown, right? So the only view I really had out of my house was the sky. And to me, when I looked at the sky, I found God. And I found a way to talk to God by talking to the sky. And because the sky was always there and it never left, whether night or day. So that's what really grounded me and helped to quiet me during the pandemic. On the community side, I think my church, we realized how we were so separated during the year of 2020, and everyone was just divided, and we were losing a lot of people as well. So for 2021, our theme was growing in community. So our focus was really to reach everyone, to go down to the ground. I did a lot of deliveries of snacks, goodies to elderly people who can't come down to church physically, or who don't even know how to use Zoom or Facebook to tune into services. And in reaching out to the community and in helping, especially people who needed the help, in sharing that love, I think that's what helped get us through the pandemic.
I really love that kind of service of neighbor as a spiritual practice that helps you during hard times, and also a relationship to creation. I hear you say both of those things, and I think those are seem to be really profound spiritual tools for you. So thanks so much for sharing those. We have one more. Abdul Jalilu, would you like to share with us a little bit about some spiritual tools that have helped you during these past 2 years of uncertainty? What has gotten you through from your spirituality?
Okay, thank you. For me, what I experienced or what I used to do for the rusty 2 years, what I do first of all, I just use the preaching, which means inviting others to the queen, or to by teaching others. So I just use it to teach my fellow youth, so that to become aware for different situations. And the second one, I use the group discussion. I use it to discuss with my fellow youth via online discussion, via WhatsApp group concerning what concerning such things. And also I use it to practice. When I told them maybe the issue of washing the hands, I used to practice first in myself, and then we follow up what I used to practice. And also another thing which I used to ask you questions and answer. They used to ask me questions, and I just answering their questions, and they just yes, what I want to mean, what I intended to talk or to talk to you is that I used it to ask the questions, and they used it to ask and to search for questions in different sources. For example, they used in here online to ask what to do so as to fight against the pandemic. Also, I used it to invite each other, different faiths, neither Muslim or Christians or and out of the like. I used to invite them and to talk and to teach them about it, what to do during this bad pandemic.
Thank you. I love how you talked a little bit about the other side of intergenerational relationships in your spiritual tradition, that you're talking to a lot of youth and having these kinds of dialogues as well with them, and trying to figure out together in that kind of supportive intergenerational community about how to live together. Thanks so much, everyone, for being willing to answer that question. And it's a good example of what we're talking about, which is having conversations with each other where we share a little bit about where we come from and hear a little bit about where others are coming from. And so the next question I have is, we don't all have to answer it, but we'll kind of just have a conversation about it. There's two parts of it. One is, how have people from other faith traditions inspired you during this pandemic? And kind of the other side of that is, what have been challenges to interfaith relationships during this pandemic? So you can kind of talk about some of the gifts, the joys, some of the things that you have appreciated about folks from different faith traditions other than your own. And then what's been difficult about interfaith dialogue and relationships, especially during this time. Jamie, maybe we'll start with you if you're willing to offer us a little bit of reflection on that.
Yeah, I would say the inspiring thing was watching how everyone still tried to make community, people were still trying. They said, okay, we can't be inside, let's take over a whole parking lot, or let's take over a whole park, or let's build a brand new website where we can all do a thing online here. And what's really inspiring is people didn't lose sight of the values of things. So in Judaism, there's kind of a rule that in order for a prayer service to become an official holy space, you have to have 10 adults in one space to make it a holy prayer space. but because of COVID-19, we couldn't get 10 people in one room. But the rabbis were able to be flexible and say, okay, if you have 10 people who have been bar mitzvah and are in the same Zoom room, that counts. Okay, that counts as a virtual community. And so just the way everyone was willing to be flexible and to try to create community wherever they could, that was really great. The other side of that was, I don't think this is particular to just faith communities. What made interfaith dialogue so hard is what makes, I think, a lot of inter-community dialogue so hard right now. And it's just the way that I think the internet is broken. People are really pushed into these tiny communities online, and it's really hard to talk to people who are different from you just with text on the internet.
Yep.
So this part of the internet makes it great to have conversations. So Twitter makes it really hard to have interfaith conversations.
Yeah, I have never had a robust interfaith dialogue on Twitter, though maybe some folks watching this webinar have. Please give us tips and tricks in the comments if you know any. But I love that reflection on the kind of double-edged sword of the tool that is the internet, that it can allow for it has allowed for some really beautiful creativity, as have our faith communities, and also it can be pretty divisive and insular. Thanks. Saruni, you want to share with us a little bit?
Sure. I totally agree with what Jamie said about trying to make community. I especially saw that when perhaps in the beginning people from different communities were still trying to give out food supplies or supplies to those that were in quarantine. And that, I think, transcended beyond their own members of their community, just to basically reach out to as many people as they can, which was really, really nice to see. And but yeah, I also agree. And also particularly when vaccines also started rolling out, a lot of centers, religious centers, also tried to, in Indonesia particularly, try to just make sure people got vaccinated as quickly as they can, and as many people as they can, I think, which was really, really good as well, particularly in this pandemic. And but I totally agree with the internet as a double-edged sword, I guess. It's happened a lot in Indonesia, where a lot of discussions online, particularly in like comment sections of Instagram posts as well, like people targeting or commenting on something totally unrelated to the post, but like then attacking the background of those who are involved. And so, I think it's good that the internet is allowing people to have these discussions, but the internet itself has been quite hostile in Indonesia. Like it's easy for you to just say something and people attack you, and not just people, I think perhaps even in some cases the government as well, which have been quite sad and just repressive. But yeah, trying I think the idea should be how we can, like Savannah mentioned earlier, just to make this safe and brave space for people to talk about it on the internet. Yeah, and I think it's still a work in progress in Indonesia, I think. But yeah, because a lot of Indonesians use like platforms such as Twitter and Instagram particularly. I think it's been a strategic platform to kind of raise issues about interfaith issues, perhaps even more general issues about gender and a particular pressing issues in society as well. Issues that raised up quite a lot recently was about like sexual harassment. And yeah, a lot of interfaith communities are really talking about it on these platforms, which is really cool.
Yeah, thanks for sharing a little bit about that. And I'm really curious about your experience in Indonesia. I appreciate the perspective from that specific context. And I know there are a couple of folks on the panel who represent religious minorities in their own communities. And so I'm wondering how you cope with some of the like you said, the vitriol, some of the hard comments on social media, especially during this time, and how some of that has grown, or like you said, could be supported by some structural entities sometimes. How have you coped with that in your own life and community?
Okay. I've been quite lucky to be surrounded with like very supportive people, and like even in my own Ahmadi community, we have, I think in the pandemic in the last 2 years specifically, the issue of mental health has also quite risen, and that even within these communities, we have kind of like self-help groups, like, and also psychiatrists to help and to make sure that people are, okay with what's happening on the internet as well, not just outside with the pandemic and everything. And so that's been very, very helpful, I think. And I know that recently, particularly on the issue of the rising sexual harassment towards women in Indonesia specifically, there was this gathering with women and like women in academia and also NGOs that came together, also from like different interfaith communities that came together to talk about this issue, which I thought was really, really cool. So yeah, having these safe, brave spaces, I think, that actually make people come together, I guess, to kind of collaborate, perhaps, not to think of each and everyone's differences as something that's that makes a barrier between us, but perhaps like work together with the differences to address a more pressing issue around us, which was, yeah, really, really good.
That's beautiful. That kind of solidarity can, like I hear you say, can also offer kind of that personal help when you're facing struggle. To feel that interfaith community has some solidarity in these important issues makes me feel like less alone, which does help a lot. Rebecca, I'm really curious about your context then. What are some experiences of these interfaith relationships that have been present in your life in Singapore, either, in your personal life or in your life working with the church?
I think when Saruni mentioned her government, I got reminded of a certain issue that became a hot topic during the pandemic in Singapore, and that was our treatment of migrant workers. So a lot of workers who come from India, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Indonesia, they come here without their families, and they come to earn a wage to send back home to their families. And the way the whole thing is structured is that they are put into dormitories, and it can be like 500 in a single small building, and they all have to live together, eat together, shower together, and it's just very cramped quarters. So you can imagine, for the pandemic, that's not good news at all. Being in such close contact with each other, the cases spread like wildfire in these dormitories, and unfortunately, it was something that the government set up, and they weren't doing that much to help as well. So this is when, like Saruni said, courage is important, and I really saw that in the interfaith communities. Mosques and churches opened up their premises for some of these workers to stay in, so that they can have more spaced out quarters. A lot of temples got involved in cooking food for these workers, because they weren't provided with really great resources as well to cook for themselves. And yeah, everyone stepped up beyond the faith communities as well. Non-profit organizations suddenly just came together to help these workers, and to really give them decency in the way they are meant to live in Singapore. And yeah, that's how I really saw different faith traditions come together during the pandemic. I guess a challenge then would be going back to the government that there isn't that much support, and certain things that you want to do and go forward with, you really need the backing of the authorities, the leaders, and you need them in your corner. So yeah.
Yeah, I see. I really appreciate that kind of reflection on the balance between governmental and non-governmental organizations and how the interfaith community can have a big impact on the wider community through these kinds of cooperation. And I see there are some folks in the chat as well who are sharing some of their own experiences of interfaith dialogue and collaboration. And we know, like you said, Rebecca, and Saruni, you also mentioned it's not always easy, and it's not sunshine and daisies all the time. That sometimes there is some conflict, and sometimes it is quite difficult to enter into these conversations. And I wonder a little bit about why that is, and am wondering, Holly, in your own interfaith context, what have been some joys and also some challenges in either in your context in Bangladesh or in your work you've seen with the Alamana Center? What are some gifts of these interfaith relationships, or what are some challenges that you've had?
Yeah, here in Oman, first I want to share what is in Alamana Center I am learning. So it's really very touchy things for me, interfaith dialogues, interfaith trust building and peace, how we can grow up our peace to neighbor friends, neighbor faith people. So it's not new for me in just like interfaith based life, because I live in Bangladesh. So that's why it's not new, but here in Alamana Center, I find some new things. What is we can sit and we can take time and we can just share each other feelings about interfaith. How do I feel for some other faith peoples? So it's really nice. We don't have any experience about this. Some of my close friends I share about sometimes, but not that much deep. We can't we can't share because we think it's not our dialogues. It can be the peace leaders, the religious leaders. They can first take steps, then we can just talk. But here isn't like this. Everyone can share each other feelings about interfaith. So this is, for me, it's a very impressive things. And how Alamana always trying to get touch all faith people together. So it's really impressive, all things for me I'm learning here.
Great. I have a question about that, or for anyone also. Why, you said it's difficult sometimes to engage in interfaith conversations because it is restricted to some of these more structural leaders. As you're all youth leaders, and Holly, you're, as well, a youth leader on this call. Why do you think that happens? And how would you change that? Or, why do you think it's important for youth to be a part of leading these conversations? That's a question for anyone, so everybody can think about it. Maybe Holly, you could answer, but anybody could just raise up your hand too after if you have a thought about it.
Yeah, in my what I know, it's just need to start to talk each other about this. But we are just a bit worried about this. We are not that much easy to talk about this. So this is our, I think this is the walls. This is the hard things for us. And for also the leaders, I think. Leaders, we have interfaith dialogues, interfaith some seminars, some things happening in Bangladesh, but they're not much very close, very open. They are just their opinion sharing and went back their places, and they're saying like we are different, we are the best. That kind of perspective they take themselves, and they are not that much open for this. So this is hard.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and is kind of a hard posture to overcome, especially sometimes maybe. I know for me as a youth leader, it can feel especially difficult to overcome this posture if you don't know the system very well. And so maybe that is, from my perspective, something we try to do with the LWF is give young people exposure to institutional leadership so they know the system better, so they feel more confident speaking up and showing up to these conversations.
Yeah, we did. It's very new for me. So day before yesterday, I did one of scriptural reasoning. It was about Moses. Yeah, we did. It's similar to Christian and Muslims faith. They have also what Prophet Musa, and we know our prophet also Moses. So we talk about Moses' life and something, and we can open our mind. We can what is our similarity? How can we stay as? How can we build our trust each other? To that is work, I think. And
actually looking at text together and trying to hear what we think about it.
Yes.
I want to acknowledge, that we have Adujalalu has maybe dropped off, and so as we were saying earlier, Jamie and Saruni, I know you both said also the online space has limitations in terms of access, and so hopefully he'll be able to log back on, but that's definitely a factor in these conversations as well. Thanks so much, Holly. Those are really helpful reflections, and also, for your perspective on how to get young people involved. Really, like you said, starting the conversations from a perspective of here's a text. How does this speak to my context? How do you hear this? And opening up, like you said, your minds to other people's lived realities. I wonder, from others of you, why do you think it is difficult for young people to become involved in interfaith dialogue, and why is it important, or how would you get more young people involved in this work?
Maybe I can share from the Singaporean perspective. Our country is quite young, and for the past 50 years, we were built on this policy of racial harmony. So that means being in constant contact with other people of other races, other religions. But the thing is that we know, or we are taught to know about these differences, but to swallow them and to focus on getting along with each other. In favor of an environment of tolerance and not so much of understanding and acceptance. And so there isn't much space, or there isn't much motivation for people to pick up the courage to engage in interfaith activities, especially young people. I think most of what I've had is also informally among my friends, with Chinese friends, with Malay friends, with Indian friends as well. And slowly through these conversations, we are also learning that this policy of racial harmony is changing, because we are starting to see more spaces of dialogues open up as people realize that tolerance is not enough. It is about understanding and acceptance, and learning how to be in community with people respectfully and lovingly. So yeah, there wasn't, from our forefathers, there wasn't much of a reason to do so, but now we are finding that reason, and yeah, we are building on that very slowly. Podcasts, like Saruni said just now, is one of the ways as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think you're right, that movement from tolerance to real collaboration, empathy, and community. It does ultimately make our communities much stronger to know each other, but it takes effort because we can, like Jamie was saying earlier, pretty easily be self-contained in our own. That's true about like our own probably religious communities and other communities as well. So it takes intention. I see we have Abdul back on the call with us. Welcome. We're glad you're here again. And wondering about your experience of interfaith relationships in Tanzania. Do you what are your experiences of talking with people of other faiths, and why is it important to you as a youth leader to do this, to have these conversations?
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'm sorry for the connection. I have a connection problem in Tanzania, especially in Morogoro where I are. The connection is a big problem. But I think now you can hear me properly.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. What I have been experiencing, especially in Tanzania, we are just relating to other faiths, especially to the Christians, because I'm a Muslim. I'm just related to a Christian in many aspects, especially in game or in sport. You can say we are just relating each other without any problem, and also just sharing, or we are just contributing each other from problem that occur. For example, in funeral ceremony, we are just supporting each other if the problem like that occurred, and also we are just contributing each other in community building, or you can say community development. We're just contributing each other. We interact very smooth. When we come to what makes me to do this work as a young leader is, I remember when I was in secondary, school, I met with a man called he was of a you can say a joke name that Sabonge. It's called Sabonge, and is the one who makes me to become interested in this job. And another thing which makes me to become interested is the problem, because I remember I faced this conflict between the Muslim and the non-Muslim, and the conflict was very little. The conflict occurred that a Muslim said that Jesus, which is Nabi Isa, is not a god, and a Christian were in favor of his point that Jesus is a god. So it was the little things which make them to conflicting each other, and I meet them, and I tried to my level best to make them to complete their conflict, and from there I started that there is a need to go or to teach this youth or youngest team, and you cannot teach a youngest while you are, and as me, I'm young, and it will be able for me to face them and to teach them friendly. So that, and from that, I started to study how to approach people, how to address them and other the like. But most of what makes me or what motivates me to engage in that is due to this two scene, the conflict which I face between the Muslim and non-Muslim, and the first one is the speech of Sabonge. He makes a good speech, and it makes me to become interested to solve the problems that occur between the interfaith. But for now, I can say thanks God, because I have been reached in a good level, because now I have more than I don't actually the amount, but more than 10 friends, reader of non-Muslim, and we share each other in good manner and other of the like. So I appreciate that, and I think from this meeting, I'll get more friends such as Rebecca and other of the like. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for telling us a little bit about your context in Tanzania, and I certainly hope that this specific conversation and conversations like this one help us to build up the kind of trust and friendships that it takes to continue to do this work, just in the way that you said. We only have a few more minutes here, so we're going to have to make some closing remarks. I'm interested in, as Savannah has put in the chat, and as we've just heard from our friend Abdul, why do you get involved in this work? And we're youth, we have the platform right now. What do you want other, structural leaders, people of other generations to know about your hopes for youth involvement in interfaith dialogue? We haven't heard from Saruni or Jamie in a while, so maybe if one of you wants to just say a little bit about why you do this and what you want folks to know about youth leadership in interfaith dialogue.
Sure, I can jump in here. I think one thing that makes this panel different is that it's proactive, right? We're not reacting to something that happened that forces a dialogue to happen. Sometimes interfaith dialogue only happens after a conflict or after something goes wrong. And I think really interfaith dialogue just needs to be constant and consistent. I guess that would be my big thing, is making it a regular part of your faith practice or your community practice, is constantly engaging in interfaith practice. And I think, like other members of the panel have said, is really focusing on our similarities and not our differences. We all come from communities of value, that moral value and family values that I think are much, much more similar than different.
I think that's a really wise reflection to be proactive. I'll see y'all here next week, I guess. We'll keep going. But to not only have these conversations in a moment of crisis, but to build the foundation of these relationships in our everyday lives. Yeah, maybe Saruni, do you want to give us a word as we head out?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely agree with Jamie said, and as well as other panelists as well. Like coming together, perhaps not because of conflict, but perhaps when earlier we mentioned about food. I think food and perhaps other creative ways, such as through. I know from a lot of the things going on in Indonesia is that like we present videos as well, like documentaries of perhaps just our daily lives, I guess. So we don't have to come together just because of conflict. And what I really like about this space as well is that it's a space where we come not just because of our backgrounds, but like with what we have to say as well. The idea of consent I think is very important, that I think should be in a lot of discussions in interfaith dialogues in Indonesia as well. But also the fact that there are gender boundaries as well happening in a lot of interfaith dialogues, especially perhaps in Indonesia. A lot of those who are speaking tend to be the men, but like what I like about these dialogues is that also have perspectives from the women, the girls as well. So I think this is a really, really good space to, just let everyone have their say despite of their titles or anything, basically. So yeah. I'd like to see a lot of these discussions go along. Yeah.
Thanks so much for bringing up that important issue. And it's one of the things that I love about youth work. It's one of the reasons I stay in youth work, is because youth have a specific lived experience of the world right now. Everyone has been a youth. Older folks have been a youth too, but being a youth right now is a specific experience, just like being any generation right now is. And when we don't have youth voices, or Saruni, like you're saying, we don't have women's voices, or we don't have voices from different faith traditions in these conversations, we miss out on some of the richness of our own communities and some of the wisdom that we have from every generation and folks of different genders and different religious backgrounds. I also love that this panel is so regionally diverse. We're from all around the world. And it's been a real joy to hear a little bit about your own context. And I could listen to you talk forever, but we want to be also respectful of people's time. I will just say before I turn it over to my colleague, Aro, that we want this conversation to continue. One of the things that we're going to do on the LWF Youth social media pages is post just 3 questions from this conversation that we posed to the panel, and encourage youth, Lutheran youth and youth of other religious backgrounds, to take those questions over the course of the rest of this year. And like Jamie said, be proactive about starting simple conversations about different spiritual gifts and tools of the traditions of other people, to ask questions about these interfaith dialogues going on in communities. And so to really be proactive about that conversation, we'll be posting those questions, and would love to hear anyone of any generation's reflection on how those conversations go over the course of this year. I want to say from my side, thank you so much for your candor, for your honesty, for your vulnerability in this conversation. I, like my friend Abdul Jalilu, am excited about having some new friends, and hope that we get to continue this conversation into the future. Thank you so much for being a part of this today. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Aro to give us just some closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Savannah. It's really, really a pleasure. And thank you so much also for all the panelists. You know, I received a text message, a WhatsApp message from one of my friends who has been also part of listening of this panel, and his reflection was that this was the best panel discussion and webinar for a long time. And I mean, there's some people who actually do this almost for work to listen of this. So I really applaud all of the panelists, and I've been trying to listen carefully. My name is Reverend Aaro Rytkönen, and I'm working with the Alamana Center, which is Interfaith Dialogue Center based in the Sultanate of Oman, and really, really honored to also co-organize this event together with the Lutheran World Federation. I'm really thinking of the Alamana Center and the work what we are doing over the past years is to try to provide a safe space for people of faith, especially concentrating on young people and women, but then also working together with students and working together with faith leaders. And I would say also what we have here today is that the COVID pandemic has caused a lot of challenges for all of us, because what we have been doing before is to facilitate workshops and training events in the Sultanate of Oman, in the small center we have there, doing that on a grassroots level and helping faith communities to work on their issues and have a collaboration. I think there was a lot of thoughts in this panel which very much resonate with the work what we are also doing. I really applaud what Saruni was saying about coming together around food, because what we have been doing in our workshops is that when it's not about official dialogues that might be needed somewhere, but what we do think is that We need especially people coming together and learning from each other on an everyday situations, living together, eating together, making food together, washing dishes together, and having discussions face to face, as Holly said, that what has been happening now over the last month when Holly has been also at the Alamana Center. I think that interfaith solidarity, which was also raised in one of the comments, I think that that's extremely important, because then we are really not only defending ourselves, but then we also are shoulder to shoulder to each other, and as especially I think that's important for the minorities. I do think that that this kind of an interfaith work and coming together, trying to get rid of the prejudices, what we might have and what the communities might have, we need to show the way. I think that has come also really well visible in this panel. So I do think that the methodologies we are using at the Alamana Center is something that is resonating really well what people have been telling here. So I'm really honored just to be able to listen what has been said and taking advice from that as well. I just want to end by saying that this was yet another occasion where we see that we shouldn't be speaking about youth as a future, but we should be speaking about youth as a current leadership, and there's so much to learn and also to be able to give them way, especially now during the COVID pandemics, because I think this has showed us also that the old things doesn't really work. We need to create new things, and that proactiveness, what Jane was talking about, I think that's the key here. So I just want to say thank you to everyone from the side of the Alamana Center. Thank you, LWF. Thank you, everyone participating in the panel, and thank you, everyone, for listening. I think it's been really, really good use of 70-something minutes. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Just wanted to allow everyone to give a little wave, say thanks so much for joining us. Please check out the Alamana Center online, check out the LWF youth pages, as well as the main Lutheran World Federation page to learn more about how these dialogues continue. Thank you so much to our delightful panelists, and we look forward to speaking more in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.